Hey you guys, this is Catherine with Foods That Heal You, and in this first video of our video series, how to reduce inflammation in your body, we're going to be covering 10 different foods that can actually cause inflammation. So you may be looking at this whiteboard thinking, well, I already know that sugar and sodium and whatever can cause inflammation. But I'm going to go through these in more detail because not all sodium is bad, not all protein's bad. So you really need to understand and determine whether the food that you're consuming is the good version of it or the version of it that might actually cause inflammation. So let's go ahead and get started here with the first one I have, and that's going to be processed foods. So in general, a processed food is going to be anything in a bag, a can, a box, something like that. In a perfect world, we would want to pick the nuts and seeds or apple or whatever off the tree and eat it as a true whole food. But that's not the world we live in. We do buy things in a box, can, package, whatever. So what you really want to look at is how processed is it? Is it minimally processed and actually might help reduce inflammation? Or is it heavily processed like pancakes, waffles, flour, crackers, cakes, things like that? Those are heavily processed. So I have a couple examples of minimally processed foods. Potato chips, highly processed, okay? TV dinners, highly processed. But what I have here is a couple examples. One is Flackers. This is a great example of a healthy food that can help reduce inflammation, but it is processed because it is in a bag. So it's the whole seed though, that's the first thing. It's the whole seed. It's not ground up, refined into a flour. You get the whole seed. It's raw. It's not even been cooked. All that's added to this are herbs and spices. So this is an example of a processed food that's actually good for you. Another example of a processed food that's actually good for you would be coconut chips. These are just dehydrated coconut meat. Nothing's even added to it except maybe a little bit of sea salt. It's minimally processed, it's raw, it's gonna have all its nutrients intact. It's the next best thing to eating the fresh coconut. So again, it's processed because it's not the coconut itself, right? But it's minimally processed and it's even still raw. Now, example of something that's just a little bit more processed, but not off the deep end like waffles, right, would be almond milk. So almond milk, as you can see here, I have this almond milk, and we do drink almond milk, but it's a little bit more processed. It's not a whole food. The almonds have been ground up, and the juice has been squeezed out of them or whatever. It's also got additives. If you look at the ingredients, there's some additives you don't even know what they are. So that's going to be a little bit more processed without being off the deep end. All right, so this is kind of a a little bit more than minimal processing. Other examples might be, for example, the green powder, our daily greens. Yes, they're processed, but they're loaded with nutrients, and they're gonna help reduce inflammation in your body. So at the end of the day, you want to determine whether the food is highly processed or minimally processed, and choose the minimally processed as much as possible that's in its whole food form, like the flax seeds. The seeds are in its whole form. The coconut chips, it's actual coconut meat, just dehydrated, okay? All right, that's the first one. The second one's gonna be food allergens. So a lot of people are familiar with, for example, gluten allergy, dairy allergy. But the thing is, a lot of people are allergic to a lot more foods than just dairy or gluten. Gluten is top of the list, and it is super common, and it's because the way grains are processed today, especially in America, they're removing all the good stuff and leaving a bunch of gluten, and we're over consuming gluten, and there's a whole series video on, I think it's Natural News, that you can watch on that. But the point is you gotta be careful of food allergens that are gonna actually trigger inflammation. So I would definitely recommend staying away from gluten. Even if you don't have an intolerance to gluten, gluten is one of those that does cause inflammation regardless, okay? But you're gonna wanna be aware of other foods that you might be sensitive to. You might not even be, quote, allergic to it. You might just not be digesting it well. Or if you have autoimmune disorder, right there, I can tell you, you have food allergies, because that's how, when you have autoimmune disorder, you have leaky gut, and there's food particles that get through and cause food allergies. So you wanna look at food allergies, be very aware of that. You don't need to be freaked out about it or be, fearful of it. But if you, for example, eat something and you get stomach upset or pain, or you don't feel good, or then that's a symptom that you're not digesting that food way, and you're going to want to avoid it until you can heal your gut and actually reverse some of those food allergies. But food allergies will definitely trigger inflammation. Gluten's at the top of the list. Eggs are often inflammatory food. There's nightshades for some people. But what I want to make sure is that you don't get too hung up on it and start eliminating everything in your cabinet, saying I'm allergic to everything. You do want to be careful, and you want to heal your gut, and I have a series on how to do that as well. The third one is going to be sodium. So sodium is good and bad. We need salt. We need unrefined sea salt. We have to have it. That's what gets nutrients into our cell. What we want to avoid is salt that's going to cause inflammation, which is going to be table salt, refined salt. Now, I'm going to show you what unrefined salt looks like, but refined salt is going to be any restaurant food that you put in your mouth. I can guarantee they're not using real unrefined sea salt. And if they are, that's awesome, but it's really unlikely, okay? So if you go to a restaurant or eat out anywhere, just know that you're probably getting a lot of salt, and it's not the right kind, and it's going to cause inflammation and swelling. I've even gone to Panera Bread and gotten their healthy salad, right? But their salad dressing, my feet swell within 30 minutes after consuming their salad dressing. Now, I'm not saying, I don't want to tear down Panera. They're one of the healthier choices out there compared to a lot of fast food. But they're not perfect, and the sodium in there is going to cause inflammation. So what you're going to want to look for with sodium is avoid prepackaged foods with sodium. Some do have sea salt now in the prepackaged food. You can look for that. That's helpful. But unfortunately, even some sea salt can be refined. For example, I won't tell you where I went because I don't want to, again, tear down a bunch of companies. I went to a deli counter and I asked them, what kind of sea salt is in your prepared potato salad, for example? And they showed me the container, and it was refined salt that said sea salt on it. It was white salt. It was Morton's sea salt. Well, the package that they showed me was white salt. It was refined. It was not unrefined. So yeah, it came from the sea, but it's still going to cause inflammation. And I know this can maybe sound a little bit confusing, but really just at the end of the day, add your own salt and avoid anything that's prepackaged with a bunch of sodium in it. And that will be the simplest way to do this. This is what we use in our house for unrefined sea salt. You can see there's a little bit of color there. You want the color. You don't want just straight white. You can also get pink Himalayan salt or gray Himalayan salt. There's different salts, but you want something with color. That means it's not been heavily processed. So it's actually going to help reduce inflammation in the body and provide the sodium that you do need. All right, dairy. So dairy is going to cause inflammation for so many reasons. If we were back, thousands of years ago, where the dairy was coming straight from the animal and we were drinking it raw, fresh, no hormones injected into the animal, no antibiotics, all these different things that they're feeding our animals and putting in our animals, injecting them with, those chemicals, whatever the animal eats, you eat. So if your cow has been eating grains that are, grains that are not good for it, and injected with antibiotics and injected with hormones, and then they pasteurize and homogenize the milk and the cheese and all this, that's not healthy. That's actually going to cause inflammation. Now, if you can get a hold of raw goat milk or raw goat cheese, those I would say are very acceptable. They're not going to necessarily reduce inflammation, but they're not going to exacerbate or contribute or cause inflammation like the pasteurized, homogenized, non-organic. And that's another thing with dairy that people get really confused about, is the organic versus non-organic. Even the organic is going to be very processed, and it's going to cause mucus in the body too. If you're somebody who has a lot of sinus problems, then I would challenge you to quit all dairy, cheese, ranch dressing, milk, anything dairy for 30 days and see if that sinusy problem goes away, or the mucus problem, or the cough, the chest cough. A lot of people are really clogged up, and dairy can be a huge factor with that. If you have any kind of allergies as well, like pollen allergies, any kind of, like airborne, that's the word I'm looking for, airborne allergies. It's another situation where I challenge you to take dairy out of your diet for 30 days, see how you feel. I'm telling you, it's going to reduce inflammation in your body, reduce that mucus that's clogging you up, and you're going to feel a lot better, okay? And you can replace dairy with almond milk. And most people are already familiar with that, but almond milk or coconut milk are great replacements for dairy. Okay, excess protein. So protein can be plant-based protein, it can be animal protein, and then you can consume a certain amount, high, low, whatever. So the first thing is you're going to want to choose plant-based proteins when you can, because plant-based are going to be much less, and they're going to actually a lot of times reduce inflammation versus causing inflammation. Where we get into trouble is when we overdo the animal protein. Dairy is an animal protein, but also I'm talking about animal meat and turkey and poultry and fish, all of these, and fish is in its own category, so I'll get to that. But when you consume an animal product that's protein, you have to consider, first of all, you want to make sure it's organic. That is huge because, again, like I mentioned with the dairy, if the animal's injected with antibiotics, hormones, grain-fed, all of these things all are going to, it's like you're consuming them. So it's going to cause inflammation in your body when you eat them. So make sure you're getting organic at the very least when you're buying animal foods, animal products, okay? So then the other thing you want to consider is how much protein. Excess protein from any source is going to cause inflammation. So you want to make sure that you're not, for example, eating meat with every meal. You want to make sure that you're not overdoing it. People in our society tend to overdo the protein. They're chugging all these protein powders, meats, all this stuff. Make sure that you actually need protein before you start flooding your body with too much of it. Because honestly, I've done urinalysis tests for people before, and I've never seen someone protein deficient, ever. I mean, it's just so rare. The people that are protein deficient are the poor people who, are literally homeless or starving, because only 3% of the population is protein deficient. 97% is fiber deficient. We've got it all kind of backwards. You need to be focusing on nutrients, not just protein, okay? So probably, and every food you eat has protein, everything. Even a bell pepper has protein in it because there's amino acids in it. So every food you consume has a certain amount of protein in it. So just be careful not to consume too much protein, and be careful when you're consuming animal protein. My suggestion would be, if you're someone who wants to eat animal protein, I'd say 2 to 3 times a week, especially if you're trying to reduce inflammation. I would say no more than 2 or 3 times a week, okay, as far as the animal protein goes. You can get your protein from beans, seeds. You don't need the animal protein. Okay, refined carbs. So everybody's on the low carb bandwagon. Carbs are bad. Well, I got news for you, they're not bad, okay? It's the kind of carbs that you're consuming. Refined carbs, yes, they're going to cause inflammation. So what's a refined carb? A refined carb would be something that's heavily processed. For example, potato chips. The potato's been heavily processed, or flour. So you can have, for example, quinoa, which is a healthy grain, and is a complex carb, which is actually healthy, or you can have quinoa flour. For example, you might find a tortilla shell that says quinoa flour, and you're thinking, oh, that's healthy. Quinoa's a healthy grain, right? Well, I challenge you to look at the other ingredients. There's probably potato starch or whatever in it. But also, once the quinoa or any grain is turned into a flour, it's been heavily processed, which goes back to our processed foods, right? So we don't want something that's heavily processed. That's a refined carb when you heavily process something into crackers or something into waffles. One thing that I would really suggest that you look at labels is for the word flour. Right there, you're going to know it's going to be a refined carb. It's going to turn to sugar super fast in your body. You might as well be eating a lollipop, okay? And lollipops and candy and sugar like that, those are simple sugars. But refined carbs, what you want to look for is whole grains, whole rice, whole quinoa, beans, things like that. Those are complex carbs that are not going to spike insulin the same way that a refined, highly processed carb. Even broccoli and kale, those are carbs. You need them for energy. You need the vitamins and minerals. So think nutrients. When you're thinking about the food that you consume, you want a lot of nutrients. And when it's refined, all those nutrients are stripped out of it and turned straight into sugar, okay? Added sugar. So people are really hung up on sugar, but not all sugar is bad. Fruit is very healthy. Fruit, God didn't mess up when he made the apple or the banana or the orange, right? Or strawberries. There's a lot of fruit that's really healthy. It's high in antioxidants. It's high in energy. It's got protein in it. It's got vitamin C in it. It's got fiber in it to help buffer that insulin response. So it's actually, fruit is so healthy. I recommend that you consume it every morning for breakfast. But it's the added sugar. It's when you see the word sugar on the label, or if you see, and people get really confused about this too, honey, maple syrup. There's no fiber in those. Coconut sugar. Those are all added sugar. You can tell me all day long that coconut sugar or honey has vitamins and minerals in it, and you know what? Yeah, it does. It has a little bit. It's going to have more than just straight up cane sugar, but it's not enough to buffer the insulin response. It's not enough to provide nutrients that are going to outweigh the downside of the sugar that's going to cause inflammation ultimately. You really want to keep added sugar as low as possible in your diet, and you want to read labels very carefully. If you see the word sugar, boy, I just would avoid it as much as you can, because that's going to cause inflammation. However, if you see dates as the sweetener, like we get a granola that's a raw granola, they use dates to sweeten it. There's no sugar in it, but I know it's like, well, wait a minute. It says there's 10 grams of sugar on the label or whatever. Well, it's date sugar, and it's not date processed sugar, it's the actual whole dates. And dates, there are studies that prove that dates are super good for you. They can help cure a lot of different things. So I challenge you to look up dates online and see the benefits, the health benefits. So they're not an added sugar. Now, if it was date sugar that was highly processed and not whole dates, that's when you want to be concerned. So again, it's the highly processed sugars and the added sugars. It's not the natural sugars in fresh fruit. Now, you can overdo anything. You could sit there and do the banana diet. Right? I literally have heard of that, and I think it's ridiculous. But eat bananas all day long. Well, that's going to be too much sugar, of course, right? We're not created to eat bananas all day long unless you're a monkey. So you want to think balance too. You really have to be smart and use wisdom when you're making these choices. But sugar is going to cause inflammation. Artificial sweeteners. So artificial sweeteners are going to be things like NutraSweet, aspartame, anything that's not sugar and is not from an herb. So you want to be really careful of your diet drinks, sucralose, all the artificial sugars. So sucralose, NutraSweet, Truvia, I think is another one of those. All of those that have those chemical artificial sugars are going to be a problem for your body and cause inflammation. The only sweeteners that are actually not going to be sugar and spike insulin that are actually healthy is going to be stevia, and another one's monk fruit is another good one. So there's a couple good ones. Let me see. I've got my stevia here. This is the stevia we get, and it is processed. But if you're looking for something that's a healthier choice, that's not an artificial sweetener, this is an herb. It actually comes from a leaf. All right, so you can actually get a stevia plant and pull the leaf off and throw it in your smoothies. You could do the whole food version, or you can do the processed version that turns it into a liquid, but this is a healthier option, and monk fruit is too. So you want to avoid artificial sweeteners. They sell them as being healthy because, you won't spike insulin, or it helps with diabetes, but that's just not true. It's actually going to cause inflammation, and your body is smart. When it tastes sweetness on the tongue, it's going to start to produce insulin. That's how it works, okay? So artificial sweeteners, Omega6 Fat. So when we talk about fats, there's healthy fats, there's fried fats, it's a huge category. But the number one biggest mistakes that people are making, well, there's two big mistakes. One big mistake is omega-6 fats. We need some of them, but in ratio to the omega-3 fats, like in the flaxseed crackers or chia seeds, we need to have, the omega-6 is way off the charts. Sunflower oil, vegetable oils, those are all high in omega-6. Any chips you buy, they're going to be high in omega-6. I see a lot of packages with sunflower oil in them. It's high in omega-6. When that ratio is off, you're going to increase and cause inflammation. So that's a big, big problem right now, because processed foods have vegetable oils and oils that are high in omega-6. So we'll talk in the next video what are the healthy oils to choose, and just eliminate all the others from processed foods, because you're going to naturally get omega-6, for example, if you choose chia seeds or flax seeds or something like that, okay, or hemp seeds. You're going to get the natural omega-6. You don't need the added oils. Another thing is roasting or cooking with oils. You have to be really careful, because hydrogenated fats, fats that are heated and cause chemicals, if you're roasting vegetables, you want to make sure that you don't add the oil to the vegetables before you put them in, because the high heat is going to damage that oil, turn it into a toxin, and cause inflammation. You're going to want to leave the oil on and drizzle it on after you pull it out. Now you might be saying, well, avocado oil handles high heat, or coconut oil handles high heat. Well, they only handle high heat for like 5 or 10 minutes. What you're needing is something that's going to handle high heat for 40 minutes, and that doesn't exist. So you want to avoid adding oils when you cook And you want to, when you're using oils for cooking, leave it to medium temperature for about 20 minutes is my general rule. Then you don't have to worry about damaging the fat. And then of course there's the fats in restaurant foods, processed fats, hydrogenated fats, fried foods. Most people are aware that causes inflammation, even oils added to crackers that you might think are healthy. So you gotta be really careful with oils. The last thing here is going to be MSG. So MSG is really tricky. It's in a lot of fast food. It's in people's fast food restaurants. It tastes like salt, but it spikes insulin up to 300%. It's a neurotoxin. It's terrible for your brain. It's absolutely going to cause so much inflammation and water retention. It is so much worse than even sugar and refined salt. So you want to avoid MSG as much as possible. Look for it on your labels to avoid it, monosodium glutamate. Look for MSG, whatever. Make sure you avoid it, and make sure if you're going to go out to eat, try to avoid MSG as much as possible. This video went a little bit longer, actually a lot longer than I had expected, but I want to make sure that I really teach you guys these different things so that you can apply them to your diet and succeed in reducing inflammation and give you everything that you need to set you up for success. All right, so thanks for watching this video, Key 1 to reducing inflammation, and I'll see you in the next video where we're going to talk about foods that actually reduce inflammation. All right, thanks for watching, you guys. Have a great day.